Okay, so hello, Hangamaheshi. My name is Rhiana Jones, and I'm an environmental specialist with the Washoe Tribe Environmental Protection Department. And today I'll be talking about a very exciting project we have going on in Washoe Country, the Mayala Restoration Project and Groundwater Monitoring. So first I'd like to provide a little background about the project, how and why the Washoe Tribe got involved, the United States Forest Service Stewardship Agreement, and work that has been done thus far. The groundwater monitoring work that was started this summer and the questions that we are looking to answer with that work. So this project has been in the work for 20 years. In 1998, the Washoe Tribe signed a memorandum of agreement with the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit and the Washoe Tribe. The MOA outlined basic responsibilities for both parties, whereas the Washoe Tribe and LTBMU recognized the need and benefit in establishing a formal relationship to achieve the common goal of land and resource management in the Lake Tahoe Basin. Under the MOA, a 30-year special use permit was provided to the Washoe Tribe. So this was a huge step for the tribe to enter into such an agreement with LTBMU. This MOA basically acknowledged that the Washoe Tribe were the original inhabitants of the area, stewards of the land, and many of these lands around the Lake Tahoe area are now managed by the Forest Service. So this agreement was a beginning of inclusion of the tribe in land management activities in the region. In 1999, a cooperative agreement with LTBMU was signed and defined shared mutual interest in restoring and enhancing wetlands in riparian areas through use of traditional practices, and this established collaborative wetlands conservation planning for Meeks Meadow. Then in 2003, Congress authorized the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management into stewardship contracts and agreements to achieve land management goals for the national forests that meet local and rural community needs. These stewardship agreements would further include and involve local communities, tribes, and environmental agencies to be included in land management decisions in the Lake Tahoe Basin. So in 2019, the Washoe Tribe entered into a stewardship agreement with LTBMU to restore and maintain ecological and hydrological function to approximately 300 acres of meadow habitat, specifically Meeks Meadow. That's on the west shore of Lake Tahoe. The project is titled the Mayala Water Restoration Project after Meeks Creek, which runs through Meeks Meadow. Mayala Wata is the Washoe name for Meeks Creek. The Meeks Meadow Restoration Project allows for the Washoe Tribe to manage Aboriginal lands in a historical and cultural manner. Historically, the Washoe Tribe has primarily been in a consultation role for projects in Lake Tahoe, which greatly diminishes the tribe's legacy and history of environmental stewardship. This project serves as a template for increased tribal involvement in and around the Lake Tahoe Basin through work collaboratively with federal, state, and local agencies. The Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California is the project lead with technical assistance from the US Forest Service Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, LTBMU. So, in addition to partnering with USFS and LTBMU, this project has also been made possible by funding from a California State Prop 1 planning grant through the California Tahoe Conservancy, from a tribal wildlife grant through the US Fish and Wildlife Service, funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Fund, and from collaboration and assistance from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. So, for some of you who are not familiar with the area, I was hoping we could all meet in person together at Lake Tahoe, but next time. So where is Meeks Meadow? So Meeks Meadow is located on the west shore of Lake Tahoe on the California side. Here is what the star is indicating. This is a map of traditional Washoe territories. There are 4 bands of the Washoe Tribe: the northern band, the Welmati, the eastern band, the people of the valley, the Pawalu, the western band, the Telmet, and the southern band, the Hungalalti. The yellow border indicates the outskirts of Washoe territory, and the line indicates the main area of use by the Washoe people. As you can see, Lake Tahoe is the center of Washoe territory. The yellow star shows the approximate location of Meeks Bay and Meeks Meadow, and on this next map, it's a zoomed in view of Meeks Meadow. Here you can see it outlined in red, and here's a little filled in area there. The elevation of Meeks Meadow is approximately 6,234 feet. And here you can see Meeks Creek, this little line that runs through Meeks Meadow. That's the Mayala Wata. So here's an overview of the Meeks Creek watershed. It comprises approximately 8.1 square miles of subalpine and montane terrain along the eastern crest of the Sierra Nevadas. Originating at over 9,000 feet elevation, Meeks Creek courses through 7.5 miles of mountain terrain, lakes, and meadows before emptying into Lake Tahoe via Meeks Bay. So pre-European contact, pre-1850, the Washoe people were present at Lake Tahoe as early as 6,000 years before the present. The Washoe seasonal habitation at Meeks Bay and in Meeks Meadow has occurred for at least the last 1,500 years. In the summer, the Washoe people would migrate from the Carson Valley to their summer camps around Lake Tahoe. They would fish, hunt, gather food and medicine, as well as collect basket making materials. At the end of the season, the Washoe would burn the area to essentially prepare the area for new growth the following season, ensuring that valuable cultural resources would be available for generations to come. However, the inception of settlers disrupted this cycle. The Washoe were no longer allowed to have summer camps at Tahoe, and the Comstock era destroyed the once pristine meadow and way of life for the Washoe people. So, in an effort to maintain Washoe culture, the Washoe tribe is working to restore traditional Washoe lands that are no longer functioning in a traditional capacity, to use traditional practices such as cultural burning and traditional harvesting practices to restore and maintain sites that have historical and cultural relevance to the Washoe people. So this is just a more detailed timeline of the summary I just gave. Here you can see the Tahoe Basin is an extension of the Washoe people. As I mentioned, Lake Tahoe is the center of Washoe territory. Meeks Meadow provided the Washoe with food, medicine, and basketry material. Washoe management of Meeks Meadow included activities such as pruning, thinning, and periodic burning to keep the meadow open and encourage desirable vegetation. From 1850 to the 1870s, European Americans arrived in the Lake Tahoe Basin and began using Meeks Meadow for grazing. The Washoe population was displaced and there was less availability of land use and resources. In the 1880s, logging in the basin began. Logging was followed by erosion, dense forest regrowth, and native meadow vegetation was displaced. In 1928, Meeks Bay was developed as a resort. The present Highway 89 bridge was constructed, and currently Meeks Creek runs under the Highway 89 bridge to dump into Lake Tahoe. In the 1930s, Washoe people were relocated to designated reservations and denied access to traditional lands and practices at Lake Tahoe. From 1930 to 1970s, without Washoe presence in the meadow, continued fire suppression, conifer invasion of the meadow increases, reducing native meadow vegetation, wildlife habitat, and changing the meadow hydrology. In 1960, the mouth of Meeks Creek was dredged and to create a marina, and the wetlands were filled. 1980 to 1990s, conifer invasion of Meeks Meadow continues despite attempts by the United States Forest Service to remove trees. Flash pile burned a large part of the meadow in 95, but conifer invasion still continued. Then in 1998, LTPMU and the Washoe tribe signed the MOA regarding the operation of Meeks Bay and co-management of Meeks Meadow. In the 2000s, the Washoe tribe's continued involvement with the bay and meadow has resulted in conifer removal test plots, surveys, and monitoring. 2010, LTPMU begins planning efforts for a major conifer removal and prescribed burn at Meeks Meadow in line with Washoe traditional practices. 2016, the Washoe tribe receives federal and state funding to complete planning for the implementation of the Meeks Meadow Restoration Project. So here we are at present day, managing Meeks Meadow for resiliency and preparing for uncertain future conditions in the face of climate change. Under the Stewardship Agreement, part of the tribe's role is to coordinate work days within the Washoe community and with other agencies to help thin and remove trees. Hand tools are used to cultivate vegetation, enabling Washoe tribal members to practice traditional harvesting and provide culture management and monitoring plans for Meeks Meadow. So here we have some meadow views. You can see that on the far left, there's some open meadow, but lots of lodgepole saplings coming in and filling it in. Our next two pictures are of crew work days. These groups, whether they be Washoe community members or visiting school groups, are provided with equipment to hand thin the encroaching conifers in the meadow. So trees are either cut using hand loppers or pulled out by hand. The last picture depicts WEPD staff working with Cardinal Incorporated to conduct vegetation community monitoring. To get a picture of what types of meadow vegetation are in the meadow, what is abundant, less abundant, and to identify species with cultural significance to the Washoe tribe. So here we have Meeks Meadow on the left, and on the right is another Montane Meadow reflecting what we wish to see in Meeks Meadow. Wide open spaces with lots of meadow vegetation. And just to reiterate, the goal of the Mayala Water Restoration Project is to restore approximately 300 acres of meadow habitat through the removal of encroaching conifers by both mechanical and hand thinning efforts, vegetative treatments, and prescribed fire. The increase in groundwater availability from conifer removal will promote conditions favorable to increase the density and frequency of Washoe culturally significant plants. So here's a map of Meeks Meadow with the vegetation communities mapped out. The dark brown areas indicate mixed conifer forest with mixed conifer understory. Light brown is mixed conifer forest, dry meadow understory. The dark green is lodgepole pine forest. The yellow is mixed riparian scrub. The light green, wet meadow, and the light blue areas, dry meadow. So as you can see from this, there is a lot of lodgepole pines that have filled in the meadow, and it's hardly a meadow anymore. So we're working to clear that out and turn it back to what it is meant to be, meadow. So here is another map. It's more detail, and I apologize, the resolution is not great, but this map shows the type of work that is being done in the meadow thus far. So the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit has vegetation monitoring plots, which are here in red. The orange dots are photo monitoring points, and the yellow dots are cultural monitoring plots. These are locations where culturally significant plants were identified so we can keep tabs on them with hopes that their numbers increase as more groundwater becomes available. Soil composition has been classified and correlates to the numbers here in the lower right corner. Meeks Creek and ephemeral channels are the blue lines here, Meeks Creek being the dark blue one. And again, we have the vegetation classifications, lodgepole pine forest, wet meadow, dry meadow. And then we have treatment areas indicated by the hash marks and diagonal lines for complete removal and thinning respectively. So under the stewardship agreement, hand and mechanical thinning was set to take place this spring and summer 2020. However, due to COVID-19, activities were postponed until further notice. The Washoe Tribe Environmental Protection Department has taken this opportunity to conduct groundwater monitoring in the meadow pre-conifer removal. So collecting groundwater information prior to conifer thinning and then again post-conifer removal will provide a before and after picture of groundwater levels in the meadow. It is the goal of WEPD to determine if removal of conifers in Meeks Meadow will increase the groundwater levels, thus providing more water for the culturally significant meadow plants. So just some background information on the groundwater monitoring and why we are so excited about this project. Meadows are an important land scale feature in mountain ecosystems, providing zones of high biodiversity, late season moisture, and groundwater storage. A combination of land management activities such as stream rerouting, grazing, fire exclusion, changes in climate have contributed to conifer and shrub encroachment in meadows. This encroachment has the potential to increase the amount of evapotranspiration from shallow groundwater aquifers and lower the water table, particularly during the dry season during periods of drought. The lower water table results in less water available for native meadow vegetation, loss of meadow habitat, decreased groundwater storage, and decreased base flow in Meeks Creek. The removal of encroaching conifers and shrubs from meadows has been suggested as a way to prevent meadow xerification, promote healthy meadow vegetation, and help sustain base flow. So to date, no studies have quantified the changes in evapotranspiration from shallow groundwater aquifers and or the depth to groundwater associated with conifer removal in Montane Meadows. So in a way, this is the first of its kind, and we hope to get some really novel, cool, new information from this project. In 2014, the USDA reported that the United States Forest Service intended to restore 50% of accessible degraded forest meadows to improve their habitat function and ability to hold water longer into the summer and deliver clean water when most needed. However, according to a report by the Nature Conservancy in 2015, only one study has quantified temporal changes in flows associated with meadow restoration in the Sierra Nevadas. So the removal of deep-rooted conifers and shrubs is expected to increase water availability for native meadow flora and fauna and hence improve meadow habitat. The expected reduction in annual evapotranspiration is also expected to raise the water table, resulting in increased groundwater storage and prolonged late season base flow in Meeks Creek. So we seek to quantify the change in depth to groundwater and evapotranspiration from groundwater aquifers, resulting from the removal of conifers in Meeks Meadow. This study will be the first to quantify these changes related to the removal of encroaching conifers and will provide valuable information for similar restoration work in the future. So our objectives are to quantify the changes in the water table, altitude and depth to groundwater following the removal of conifers from Meeks Meadow, quantify changes in evapotranspiration from shallow groundwater aquifers resulting from the removal of conifers and the reestablishment of meadow vegetation, as well as identify any relationships between changes in the depth to groundwater and vegetation communities. So this study will provide the WEPD and United States Forest Service with a better understanding of how different vegetation communities affect meadow hydrology, in particular the depth to groundwater and evapotranspiration from groundwater aquifers. Measured changes in groundwater storage and evapotranspiration from these aquifers resulting from the removal of encroaching conifers will provide the United States Forest Service and the scientific community with previously unavailable information to help guide future meadow restoration. Furthermore, groundwater recharge rates and information about the source of groundwater may be inferred from detrending the data on a daily timescale. This will provide new information related to the hydraulic regime supporting these important montane ecosystems. The land managers, environmental groups, and the public will benefit from a better understanding of how conifer removal influences the hydrology and native plant communities in montane meadows. Analysis of groundwater fluctuations in shallow piezometers offers an inexpensive way to quantify evapotranspiration of groundwater in riparian zones. So, what is a piezometer? Piezometer is a device used to measure liquid pressure in a system by measuring the height to which the water column rises against gravity. Inside each piezometer is a level logger. So what is a level logger? A level logger is a water level data logger. It's an instrument that automatically and continuously records fluctuations in water level. Water level data logs are stored in the data logger's memory and can be downloaded using software. These level loggers measure total pressure, which is the pressure of the water column plus the barometric pressure of the atmosphere. To record the barometric pressure, we used a barrel logger, which is seen here. This measures and logs changes in atmospheric pressure. So each piezometer contained a level logger, a data logger, which collects the groundwater information every 10 minutes. We had 2 barrel loggers inside 2 of the piezometers. We only used 2 as they are very expensive and the barometric pressure is about the same throughout the whole meadow. So how does it all work? The barrel logger uses algorithms based on air pressure only. It measures and logs changes in atmospheric pressure, which are then used to compensate the water level readings recorded by the level logger. So in order to accurately determine true changes in water level only, barometric pressure fluctuations must be removed from the data. So here, this is the water column. This is atmospheric pressure pushing down on it. This H is the height and the measurement you want. So you can take the barometric pressure and take the level logger pressure, subtract the barometric pressure, and you'll get the height of the water column. So essentially the height of the water column reflects the groundwater level at any given time. During the day, there is more evapotranspiration and the groundwater level drops. The height of the water column drops. During the evening, evapotranspiration drops off and you can see the rise in groundwater levels. And then this is just a picture of our piezometers. We had several different lengths. You can see they're big steel poles with holes in the bottom to allow the groundwater in. Here's a post pounder, that's how we installed them. And then this is one that's been installed. And we are taking some readings from the level logger to get the groundwater information thus far. So 14 piezometers were installed in a variety of meadow habitat. And cultural vegetation monitoring plots, areas of complete conifer removal and thinning treatments, open meadow, as well as in dense conifer stands. They're either 5 foot, 6 foot, or 6 foot 8 inches long, as seen in the previous slide. And these are our approximate locations of where we installed the piezometers in the meadow. So here's Meeks Bay, here's the trail that leads to Desolation Wilderness that we took to access the meadow, and we just went in through here to install. So here's another map with our piezometer points overlaid onto the map of vegetation communities. So you can see that we have piezometers in a variety of communities, and we're hoping that that will give us a picture of the groundwater levels and how it's affecting those specific communities when we have all our data. So we began field work on July 4th this year. EPD environmental specialist, myself, Rhiana Jones, and Coralie Dittman, pictured here, worked with hydrologist Wes Kitlaston to install the piezometers and take measurements. Here's a picture of Wes pounding in what's left of the piezometer. So this is probably, 5 to 6 feet in. And then here's a video of Coralie that I will play momentarily. Here's a piezometer after it's been pounded in. You can see it's pretty flattened out. It's hard work. So let me play this video. So that's Coralie putting this in. We would all take turns. As you can see, it's pretty exhausting. So data is currently being collected for approximately 3 months, July, August, September, and most of October. The loggers will be removed before a hard frost, as freezing temps will damage the delicate equipment inside. The still portion of the piezometer that you see here will remain in the meadow as long as we plan to conduct groundwater monitoring. And let me just say, this is not easy work. It's this big hollow pole that's basically like a stop sign post. And you have to haul these posts into the meadow along with the post pounder and a soil probe through 300 acres of meadow, looking for spots where the ground was permeable enough for installation. So first we'd use a soil probe to probe the ground for permeability. And it was our goal to fully submerge the 3 to 4 foot soil probe into the ground before committing to pounding into 5 to 6 foot piezometer, because it's a lot of work. So there had been times where we got the piezometer all the way in, the probe went in, the piezometer went in, and then there was no water at the bottom. It wasn't long enough to hit the groundwater table. So we had to pull it out and reattempt at a different location. We averaged a rate of installing about 3 piezometers per day between 3 people carrying equipment, taking turns with the post pounder, soil probing the ground for permeability, and recording data. So 3 a day, it's not great, but we got them in.
We have a question in the chat. Do the pipes fill with silt, locking in the level logger?
They do, and I will mention that later in the presentation. It's a couple of slides. So here's just a quick glimpse of our field data. This is the data that we recorded and will be interpreted by hydrologist Wes Kitlaston and provided to WEPD for continued monitoring and evaluation. Dr. Kitlaston will model the data using Python code and what I'm pretty sure is magic. Statistical magic, but still. So this year, field conditions like the shallow water table, sediment type, and thunderstorms were not conducive to a simplified water table fluctuation method that was initially proposed. So our hydrologist has developed and tested a moderately complex groundwater model that is working well with preliminary data. So we downloaded some of the loggers last month just to see what the data looked like. And then Wes created stochastic realizations of alternate realities. See, magic. Which basically means a bunch of random combinations of parameters were generated and the proposed model was run to determine what the evapotranspiration rates would be if those parameters were causing the water level fluctuation. Then the data is processed blind to the alternate reality to see if he can determine if those evapotranspiration rates using just the water level data. So Wes is a modeling whiz, and he's going to check this model against other research and make sure that it's valid. But the numbers we are seeing are stating that the conifers are super efficient at pumping water into the atmosphere. The numbers we are seeing are higher than expected, but also, like, since this work hasn't been done with respect to conifer removal, so if we're looking at meadows, evapotranspiration rates, they're lower than what we're seeing. And if the conifers are pulling all this water out of the groundwater table, then our numbers could be correct, but again, we have to check and make sure. So it seems right because conifers are so aggressive in invading meadows and thought to have an impact on groundwater levels. So He's validating these models and will provide more confidence in results. So hopefully we get some really cool novel results from this project. And as I mentioned earlier, this project is the first of its kind from a scientific perspective, evaluating water levels pre and post conifer removal. So if everything goes smoothly, the models are validated, we would like to submit a publication to a hydrology journal, get published, and get the Washoe tribe on the map for scientific research and projects supporting Indigenous knowledge systems. So to address that question, this is a video of hydrologist Wes Kitlaston clearing or developing the water column in the piezometer. So as I mentioned, the still poles are pounded 5 to 6 feet into the ground. There are holes in the bottom. And during the installation process, they allow a lot of sediment and dirt in, which will interfere with our groundwater level readings. So using a mechanical pump is usually used, but we couldn't bring one into the meadow. So our very clever hydrologist has developed a proven method to develop the water column by hand. So here he is essentially clearing out the water column. Oops. With his hand pump action. So this will clear out all the sediment and water from the piezometer, and then slowly the water table will fill back in with clean new water once it's all been cleared out. So just getting back to why we are doing this, we want to know about groundwater levels because we want to see if there will be an effect on the regeneration of native meadow plants that are important to the Washoe tribe. So here are some plants of cultural significance to the Washoe tribe. It is vital to maintain a meadow condition in order for many of these plants to thrive and propagate. So in pink, we have their Washoe names. In white are their common names and scientific names. And these are just a few on our list of culturally important plants. These plants aren't easily accessed currently in Meeks Meadow due to conifer encroachment. And you know, there are some lodgepole stands in there that you can barely squeeze through. I have lost a pair of Ray-Bans. Wes lost a measuring tape. Just squeezing through these trees, trying to get to these spots and having the trees steal our personal belongings. But I did find my Ray-Bans, so that's good. A rat got them, but that's okay. So here's another list of culturally significant plants that we are looking to increase and protect in Meeks Meadow. Again, we have their scientific name, their Washoe name, common name, what vegetation community they can be found in, and cultural management techniques for collecting and propagating these plants. So this is an ongoing project. We just started this summer and plan to continue for many years as funding allows. We plan to return to Meeks Meadow every fall and spring to collect groundwater data, as well as use traditional techniques to harvest and collect basket making materials, food, timber, medicine, and to clear the trees, tend to the plants, and help maintain a healthy meadow ecosystem. So thank you everyone in attendance. I appreciate your time. Thank you to all our partners. And if anyone has any questions, I'm ready.
There don't appear to be any new questions, just a lot of kudos and very cool, interesting project. Great idea using this section to pull out the water and sediment.
I don't see any in the chat.
So Rhiana, this is Susan. I just wanted to give people a little bit of some additional information about this project. So many of you I know, this is Susan Jamerson. I'm the current environmental director for the Washoe tribe. I've been with the tribe for about 3 years now. So a big part of working with the US Forest Service is, you know, these stewardship agreements, which, as Rhiana mentioned, took decades, literally, to get to. And then we had to go through an entire CEQA process. So for you folks from California, California Environmental Quality Assurance, right? CEQA is kind of the NEPA process on steroids. So every time we go in and do something in the meadow, we have to go through an additional CEQA process. So the restoration was done under one process. I think it was about $150,000 that we spent to Cardinal to actually go through CEQA. before we could remove the conifers and do the beneficial burning. Any other things we want to do in the meadow, we have to go through a separate CEQA process. So that would cover some of the restoration we'd like to do along the creek, which we have not even begun to address, as well as we want to put a cultural trail through the meadow that would point out a lot of these medicinal plants and the process, as well as the history of the Washoe people in that Meeks Bay, Meeks Meadow area. So all of those have to go through this separate process. So it's very, very expensive just to do any little thing. And while the Forest Service owns this land, this is the first time that a tribe has been given this level of responsibility for a restoration project on Forest Service land, at least in this region. So a big part of this, and Rhiana and Helen Fillmore, who is a new person with our team and also a Washoe Tribal Council member, we are trying to work on the beneficial burning, creating a beneficial burning cultural crew, which, as many of you know, is a kind of a hot ticket right now. And the Forest Service has finally acknowledged that these catastrophic fires, in a large part, are based on the fact that they have not done a very good job of managing this large conifer encroachment into these type of ecosystems. And so that is a big part of this. So part of our stewardship agreement is that we would, we have to, the same year we do the conifer removal, we have to burn the meadow. And these aren't slash pile burnings. These are, we have to remove all the biomass from the meadow. That was part of the deal. And so once that biomass is all removed, then we would go in and do this understory burning. And that, if it doesn't happen every year, will it probably happen every other year. And in our stewardship agreement, I think it goes out like 50 years of monitoring. So this is not a process to be taken on lightly. I think we have to do active monitoring for 20 years with extensions, but the life of the project is a 50-year time frame. So I just wanted to give a little background on that. If anybody has any other questions about the actual stewardship agreement or CEQA process.
It looks like we got a few more questions in the chat box. One of the questions is, what kind of pipe was used for the suction?
So that was a PVC pipe, just a skinny one. The outside piezometer is steel, and we just used a PVC pipe that was probably 8 feet. We tried to pull the water column out, just whipping it out and then flinging water, but it's just so long that the pump worked much better. So just a narrow PVC pipe that fit inside the steel piezometer.
Nice. Another question, did you have to get permission, and from whom, to install the piezometers?
Yeah, so I think Susan addressed this. CEQA and NEPA were done with Cardno at the beginning of this project, and the groundwater monitoring was covered under those CEQA and NEPAs.
Okay. How were the meadow boundaries defined prior to the implementation of the project?
I believe they were done using LiDAR, but Susan, do you have more information on that?
For the boundaries of the meadow, I think that was just defined by the Forest Service. There's an old logging road on the south side of the meadow, which actually runs through some private property. And so that is kind of a strange situation and is impacting our trail design. And then on the north side of the meadow is a Forest Service road that goes way back and up. This is the trailhead for the Desolation Wilderness. It's the most heavily used trail in the country, believe it or not, trailhead in the country. And so the Desolation Wilderness, this is how you would get up there, I guess, if there was, fire or whatever. So this, an interesting thing is this project, when we were out there with school kids and we were cutting the trees, people, because it's such a heavily used trailhead, were like, what are you doing cutting the trees? And we'd have to stop and explain to them that each tree was like a straw into a sponge and was pulling up all that water and not allowing the meadow plants and grasses to regenerate, and also creating this big fire hazard. So it was really interesting working with kids and the community to educate them. And so before we do any conifer removal, because we're essentially clear cutting 300 acres in Tahoe, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit of a public relations challenge. And then we're going to burn it. Again, public relations. We just need to get ahead of these things so that people don't flip out, you know, when we start pulling in huge pieces of equipment. So the conifer removal, because of COVID, got really pushed back. So we're waiting for the Forest Service to do what's called timber cruising and figure out how many board feet of biomass will be removed, how many board feet are marketable timber. They have given us permission to haul a bunch of the timber down to Washoe headquarters for a elders firewood program. They said that is a legitimate use of biomass. The other will have to be trucked hundreds of miles to a biomass plant that, unfortunately, right now I just found out is under the weather and is not operating. So that is a challenge for people doing this kind of work, that they want that biomass taken out of the ecosystem. We're allowed to tip a little bit of it, but not very much, because this all has to do with greenhouse gas emissions. So just in terms of those meadow boundaries, I think they're physical boundaries because of those two roads. And then the vegetation plant communities were done with LIDAR.
And also, if anybody wants to come and clear trees, help us clear trees in the meadow. If you have school groups or people who want to learn about restoration, give me a call. Come on out. Let's set it up.
We have some Girl Scouts that are going to come, and then we're allowed to cut Christmas trees. So we're thinking of, instead of doing a bake sale, we're going to fund our department selling Christmas trees.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
That's a joke.
Oh. Very gullible. There is another question. Is this a monitoring project that should be ongoing forever pending funding availability? Is there an estimated date of completion for this project?
I think so. I would like to see this, you know, the more data, the better. So I'd like to see this go on for a while. I believe the stewardship agreement goes to 2028. And we plan to do groundwater monitoring for at least 3 years. So yeah, I would like to see it continue. And then, you know, I think it would speak really well for the project to have, you know, 10 years of data, groundwater monitoring information about meadow revegetation after conifer removal.
Okay. There's a question here, but it looks like it might have been answered in the chat, about retrieving the data from the piezometer and how often. Looks like it's pulled out, it's on a list, fit into a USB device and downloaded. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let me go back and see here. So this is the level logger, and it hangs from a string inside the piezometer under the water. We bring our software out. It's Solinus is the company, and we have a data reader. We basically plug it in, and it downloads all the data, which we then, you know, can look at graphs, and Wes, the hydrologist, will interpret that software results. So here is just a quick picture. This is showing, I think, is temperature rises, groundwater levels go down, and you know, there's some noise here with just based on basic, I think, diurnal fluctuations. But that's all going to be smoothed out with his modeling process, and he'll be doing the evaluation of the data and hopefully have it ready for us to interpret. At the end of October, we're going to go out and collect the loggers soon and have that 3 months of data to get a better picture of what's going on out there.
Great. Another question here, but it looks like it was answered regarding beavers. if there were any beavers before contact, but it looks like none were introduced afterwards.
I think they were introduced. Susan, do you recall?
I know that beavers have been a hot topic of conversation recently. We got a little bit of money through a tribal wildlife grant, US Fish and Wildlife Service, and they are very excited about doing some beaver analog structures up in the stream. Again, we haven't even touched the stream restoration, which will probably be the next iteration of this restoration project. I think there were beavers up there, and I think there might still be beavers way, way, way up there, because this is such a influential watershed into Lake Tahoe. So, you know, we'll just have to tune in because hopefully that won't take another 20 years to get the stream restored. But we're interested in, you know, any kind of biomimicry in the meadow restoration, and so beaver dam analogs would be part of that.
Looks like there was a question about the presentation, and it will be uploaded later. What was done with the timber after? Oh no, sorry, these questions keep moving.
Just to answer that timber question, we are not allowed to sell any of the timber, and really, honestly, there's very few usable trees because they're lodge poles, so they're skinny and tall, and they're so crowded that they're not very beefy. So they really are useful for firewood and the little guys for Christmas trees, and the other for, you know, the biomass gasification plant. But there's really not any marketable timber. But we are not allowed to generate any funding from it. And if anybody's interested in the funding, in the name of transparency, we have gotten quite a bit from the California Tahoe Conservancy for the CEQA and the planning effort. We are now have a National Fish Wildlife Grant, NIFWIF, for partial mechanical and hand thinning. It did not include very much money for our crew, our staff, so that ended up being a problem. The stewardship agreement through the Forest Service is almost $1 million for this project. And that does include a number of years of monitoring. And there will, because it's a stewardship agreement, they can plop more money into it. Not that the Forest Service has lots of money laying around, but because we are now in a contractual agreement to do the monitoring, they have to help support that because there really isn't any other funding source for that type of ongoing monitoring. And then we did get a biomass removal grant from the CTC, and we're in the process of applying again to CTC, California Tahoe Conservancy, for cultural activities, more groundwater monitoring, and creating the beneficial burn crews, including training and equipment.
Are there other meadows around Tahoe that has timber invasion intercepting water?
I think there is. I don't know names specifically, but since the Forest Service, you know, made a proclamation to restore 50% of meadows that are degraded and have been encroached, you know, there must be a need for it. So, you know, again, I don't know specifically the names of them, but I think this is a common occurrence just based on, you know, these nice areas that had cows come in for grazing, timber was removed, timber moved in. I think there's probably a ton around the Tahoe Basin.
Was the plan to install piezometers within water table the whole time? Have you experienced any wells going dry while you are collecting data?
I think we have. I think we had one that had run dry, but you know, we put them in, we put the loggers in, and we just took a sample of a few to see if we could just look at the data, what it looked like, what we were seeing, make sure they were running. But in October, when we go to take them all out, we will have 3 months of data to look at, and we'll be able to see how many are running dry. This was a really dry season, so I'm a little worried, but we'll see. And, we put 14 out there, so hopefully we'll get some good numbers from the majority of them.
Nice. Was differential leveling conducted to relate each well to elevation?
This is a little out of my realm of understanding in terms of hydrology. It is something we discussed, but I would have to speak with our hydrologist to see if he's going to adjust for that. Because we talked about using like laser leveling to make sure the elevation was the same for all the piezometers. It is something we discussed, but I can get you more information on that, Stephen, if you would like. I'll ask our hydrologist.
Great. Has urbanization along the shorelines reduced vegetation water intake, leading to more water availability to the lake? Interesting to think of pros of urbanization are sacred sites.
I'm not sure. A lot of the work we're doing is set back from the road a little bit. So, I definitely think there is an impact because, as I mentioned, Meeks Creek runs into Lake Tahoe, and right now it's running under the Highway 89 bridge, and that's to be redone. So I think there must be some effect, but we just don't have the data on that at the moment.
An interesting point, Jefferson, is that because Tahoe and the clarity issues, all of the wastewater from Tahoe is not allowed to be recycled and reused in Tahoe. It is all pumped over, up and over the mountains and comes down and is actually put into ponds down in the valley where our lands are, and also to Indian Creek Reservoir. So in some ways, the urbanization is actually because the water source is the lake. So they pull water for all these people and hotels and toilets flushing, but then all of that wastewater goes out of the basin, which I think is pretty interesting, and it's cost, gazillions of dollars.
Okay. Next question. I'm sure you answered this. When are you guys ready to publish your comprehensive study, and in which journal? Awesome. Would love to read and support.
So I briefly answered that in the chat box, but this is our first season of collecting data, and so far we only have 3 months. We would like to have the before conifer removal picture and then the post conifer removal picture, so we can see actually if those groundwater levels are changing with respect to conifer removal. So we're just at the beginning. It might be we can probably publish preliminary data within a year, but we haven't discussed which journal would be appropriate. There's some fairly complex modeling, Python modeling going on in this. So it would have to, I think, appeal to a journal that focuses on groundwater level models and techniques to measure those fluctuations.
Okay. Has there been any change to the program because of California's passing of SGMA regulations?
Susan?
I'm not sure what SGMA regulations are, so maybe. Whoever's question this is, can you spell that out? Because I'm not familiar with that acronym.
It's the Groundwater Management Act, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in California. But they're not actually taking anything out. This is just a monitoring circumstance. So it won't be affected by that. However, data from this could potentially affect other things in the basin.
Okay, so Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Thank you, Emily. And then Emily wrote, impervious surfaces will create more runoff and less ground or surface infiltration.
I think it means surfaces, not services.
Yeah, I had an autocorrect error I didn't pick up right away. That when you're having all the development, the impervious surfaces that come with that, with the driveways, the parking lots, and things like that, will take away areas that could have been groundwater infiltration and have more runoff. It'll speed up the hydrologic cycle.
What part does the Forest Service play in this process? Perhaps.
Our stewardship agreement is with the Forest Service. So they are responsible to do the timber cruising, to give us all the measurements and weights that we need to know to get a registered forestry professional out there. We hope to have our own crews come out and do a lot of the hand thinning, but all the mechanical thinning and removal will be done by the Forest Service.
Well, technically, it's contractors that are doing the actual work, but the Forest Service, this is Forest Service land, so they have the final say on everything. So in terms of, they're running the contracts through us, which is really interesting. They have some capacity limitations, as many of you know. So it was their preference actually to give us the money, have us run the crews. Mechanical and hand thinning will be different contractors, most likely. And because of the stewardship agreement, we have to have a licensed professional forester on site during every day that there is conifer removal happening. Not, lopping with little kids, but when there's big equipment. So the next stage is to create the landing, what they call the landing zones. So this is getting all the roads ready for heavy equipment, getting the places where the logs will be placed until they can be put on big trucks. We had to do a separate CEQA for the biomass hauling, believe it or not. And so the Forest Service it has the oversight, but they wanted us to take charge of that. When we get into burning, because this is, again, Forest Service land, they will create the burn plan and they will provide a burn boss. That wouldn't come out of our money. And it's also liability. We don't want that kind of liability. So the Forest Service is right there every step of the way. And because it is such a public, high profile project, failure is not an option, right? Like there can't be any big mistakes here. So the pressure is really on for us. And we've hired a lot of new staff people specifically for this and some other big projects that we're doing. So I hope that answers the question.
Another question, do you discuss more in the journal article about the water balance and wastewater going out of your watershed?
So we haven't written the journal article yet, but that is a good point. And, I think it's important for the area just with respect to Meeks Creek watershed being protected. So that is definitely something we will consider and include if we are able.
Susan, does all wastewater get distributed to the eastern slopes, or does California take any wastewater to the west?
As far as I know, it all goes into Nevada. I don't quote me on that, but my understanding is that it all goes over to our side. And then if you've ever gone up Kingsbury Grade or any of those roads, down, there's all those big ranches kind of at the bottom, and there are some effluent ponds down there. So it's all kind of pre-treated up in Tahoe, and then it's brought over the hill and down. But none of it is recycled in the basin again. And another point just off this before we run out of time, excuse me, what's been really exciting is that now there is a Meeks Bay restoration project because that marina was taken out of operation due to a lot of the sediment and some invasive species issues and safety issues, lots and lots of issues. So the marina that was in Meeks Bay was taken out of operation, and there's been this huge process that Rhiana has been very involved with, helping to design the restoration of that, what will be and was once a lagoon. And that has now spilled over into Caltrans saying that they're going to redo that bridge, which was not on the priority list, and all of a sudden it is. And the bridge, when it's a high water year, the water comes down Meeks Creek, and it's being funneled through a very narrow opening under this bridge, which creates this hydraulic effect that just scours the lagoon. It's just a mess. So there's all these things happening simultaneously, which are really exciting, even though as these projects go, they're kind of seen as separate projects. But we, as the tribe, I feel like we are the common factor in all these different things, because we do have the concessionaire license to run the resort. We are the ones doing the meadow, and we are a stakeholder in the bay restoration. And then just recently, the Lake Tahoe Fund came to us and said, hey, we want to put up a bunch of interpretive signs all the way along this new bike path on the West Shore, because there's been so much momentum to renaming ski resorts in what we call Olympic Valley. And so some of the other renaming, putting back indigenous language into the basin. So it's really a super exciting time that the tribe is getting a lot of recognition. We're getting a lot of leeway in these projects. And I think you're going to see a much bigger presence of the tribe in the next few years. And so it's really a fun time after, decades of planning, to see all this stuff come to fruition.
Great, good luck. I think there's one more question. So I believe the water reclaimed from Tahoe is used in Alpine County agriculture, Diamond Valley, maybe?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. So that's at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so the Indian Creek Reservoir is in Alpine County, and it's right near the Woodfords community where Rhiana lives, and that's a whole different kettle of fish, but that is one of the effluent ponds, you're right.
Okay, thank you, Abby. And one last comment from Jefferson. I'm so jealous I am not on this restoration project. Very excited to track progress over the years to come. So great job, ladies.
Thank you.
And that's it for questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
No further questions. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you guys for your time, and thank you to our presenters. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.